welcome to WILLSTAR Mysteries. Today I have a report of a hunter who has an encounter with a massive Bigfoot while deer hunting, and it lasts for over 3 minutes. Now you want to stay to the end of the video because at the end, the follow-up investigative report gives a few more details, especially about the creature's appearance. If you're new to the channel, you might as well go ahead and hit that subscribe button right there. If you like the video, make sure you smash that like button for me. And do me a favor, might as well share it on social media. That will definitely help the channel out. Alright, enough about that. Let's go ahead and get into it. November 1996, McCurtain County, Oklahoma. In November 1996, just a couple days before Thanksgiving, my best friend and I were camping and deer hunting on Weyerhaeuser forestry land in southeast Oklahoma. The nearest town would be Smithville, but even at that it would be somewhere around 9 miles as the crow flies. This area is used to grow soft pine trees for harvesting to grind into paper pulp. The total area is something around 800,000 acres, so you can imagine how big of an area this is. There are no homes or anyone living in this area at all. In fact, you are not even allowed to build any permanent hunting cabins or such things. By this time of 1996, I had actually all but given up gun deer season. I was almost strictly a bow hunter. About 3 years before, I was actually in a tree stand and had a bullet go over my head. Some idiot was out there just taking pot shots. I had decided after that I would just stay with my bow hunting. However, my buddy wanted me to go with him as he was alone, so I decided to go ahead and accompany him. The area that we camped is in an area that is very difficult to get to, and rarely does anyone go into this area. You have to exit off a logging road and travel up this very steep clear cut that climbs up a small mountain. There is really not even a road as such that you have to travel along. At one time, the loggers just took a dozer and cut a path the width of the dozer from the bottom of the mountain all the way up and then along the crest of the mountain. And this path is never maintained, so it gets very rough and only a 4x4 can get through, and even with that, you have to drive at a speed a little more than walking speed. This path travels about 3 miles and simply dead ends just at the start of a downhill side of a mountain. Me and my buddy call this the dish. We call it that because you are traveling up this mountain in heavy forest, make a curve, and then suddenly you are facing down, and at the bottom is an area that very much resembles a satellite dish, where it is void of trees and the concave shape of the ground gives the impression of a satellite dish. This clear area is about 30 feet or so in diameter. So anyway, we make the journey up the mountain and take the treacherous path up to the dish. There we make our camp, and it of course becomes our home away from home for the next few days. It was a bit odd this year because normally you see 1 or 2 hunting camps once you enter the area from the highway, but this time we did not see one camp or hunter. Now to take note, the dish from the highway is 14 miles. Now of course that is not a straight line miles because you know how access and logging roads rarely run straight for any distance. On day 3 of our hunting trip, we get up before daylight as usual and get ready to go out into nature and see if we can find any deer. After all, that is why we are there. Even so, I had seen nothing the previous 2 days, but didn't really care because as usual, I very much was enjoying myself with the flora and fauna. I am also very interested in geology, and there is much to see in that area. To imagine that area at one time was a shallow sea never ceases to amaze me. I wish when I took my first geology course in college I would have changed my major and pursued that field further. We decided which direction we were going and we planned for our rendezvous back at the dish at 12 noon. And there we split up. My buddy continues to the west along the top of the mountain and I head south down the side of the mountain. Being that it was not yet daylight and these woods were very thick and dangerous to walk in during the daylight hours due to the rocky, rough terrain, I was not about to do any walking until first light. So after we split, I only walked about 10 yards or so and sat down and waited for a few more minutes until the sun came up. At sunup, I get up and start my hunt. I normally am not a stalker for a couple of reasons. To be a successful stalker, you must have coordination to walk and not make any noise. Also, you really need a lot of stamina. I possess neither of those traits, so I normally hunt from some type of stand. But I had sat for several hours the evening before it was ready to move. Plus, I wanted to do some exploring into a saddle I had never been into before, so this day I decided to stalk. I start walking down the mountainside, and after about a half an hour, I reach the eastern finger of the saddle. I sit for a few minutes to rest and catch my breath before taking out down this finger of the saddle. On this finger, I could view the saddle valley to my right and also could see the eastern side of the western finger of the saddle. From the top of the finger I was walking, I could see very clearly down to the bottom of the saddle, which was no more than 100 feet to the floor nearest the mountain. So from my 12 o'clock position to 180 degrees to my right, I had a totally unobstructed view, with the exception of the trees in the saddle valley. But I had a clear enough view that if a deer was in there or came through that valley, there was no way I would miss seeing it. This particular course also gave me a good look at the western finger face. Although with many trees on it, there were also several spots that had no trees, and the rock strata was exposed, which would give me a chance to look in to see if I could distinguish the type of rock there. I could also watch the ridge top of the western finger and see anything coming over the top. Over to my right across the top of this finger is heavily wooded with mainly hardwoods. However, there are some pine trees among them. This is old growth trees. Some of the hardwood, oaks and hickory, are quite large. It is heavily wooded enough that even in the bright sun, it is fairly dark in there, only a few feet in. Not dark enough that you can't see, but you certainly would not need sunglasses in there. It, just like up in the dish, it gets dark in there long before the sun is fully set. There is very little undergrowth in this area because it is so sunlight challenged, and the spacing between trees are fairly wide so that if anything of any size moved through, you would have no trouble seeing it. So I slowly stalked down this finger, keeping just inside the tree line so as not to be exposed to the valley floor and the western finger. I stalk very slowly, along in no hurry whatsoever, understanding that stalking means walk a few steps, stop, wait, and listen, and repeat. I stalked nearly the entire length of this finger and decided I needed a break, so I walk out of the tree line to a spot that is actually clear of trees about the size of a large bedroom. It only had one tree about the diameter of a basketball. There was this very fine-looking stump there that actually looked like it was made for my fat butt, and it was high enough that I did not even have to bend my knees very far to be sitting. I figured I would sit there for a while and rest my tired legs, then I would finish walking this finger all the way to the tip and look down it and into the valley across the way. Then head back because we were to hook back up at noon, and by now it was 9:30. I was a good 3 miles from camp and a very hard climb back up the mountain. Why in the hell did I ever decide to walk down that damn mountain? I knew I would have to walk back up it at some point. As I was sitting on my fine stump, I looked down the finger out to the tip. At the tip was a huge oak tree. I am 5'10", and it would have took 2 of me to wrap my arms around this thing. As I was looking at this tree and trying to figure out how a tree can grow to that size in so little soil, I then noticed just off to the right of this tree a figure walking upright from below the tip of the finger. The figure was in bright sunlight, so I immediately recognized it as walking on 2 feet, and he appeared to me to be walking with his head down. But my first thought was, what a dumbass. It is deer season, and if you are in hunting, you are required to wear blaze orange, and this guy had none. Even if you are not hunting, it is a good idea if you are out in the woods during hunting season. Now granted, I only had seen one human in 3 days, and that was my hunting buddy. But even though there were no humans for miles, I for one would never take a stupid chance like that. I guess I should mention also that during the deer gun season, logging operations cease and the loggers go home. The companies do not want their employees getting plugged by some knuckle-headed hunter. So I knew that this guy was no logger. Then the next question came to my mind, how in the hell did this guy get there? There is no logging road in that direction for a very long way. And from the nearest road, it is a long haul to that point. And that haul would not be very easy at all. In fact, that area is inaccessible even by an ATV. The next thought was, no, he is not a hunter. He is not carrying a rifle, nor does he have one slung on his shoulder. Now remember that all these thoughts were processed in my head in a matter of microseconds, while this guy was walking slowly up this slope to the top of the finger that I am on. Then the next thought through my mind was, gosh, that is a conehead from the movie with hair, because his head was very pointy. Next thought was, my God, those are big shoulders. Next thought was, why in the hell is he wearing a mink coat? Next thought, did God forget to give this guy a neck? It looked to me as his head was attached directly to his shoulders. Then this guy finally reaches the top and stands directly beside that big oak tree I was looking at just moments ago. Next thought, my God, that is one big dude. I have seen many football games, and some of those have been up in the nosebleed section. And those guys, even that high up, look big. But this was something different. I am now 83 yards away from this guy, and he is the biggest person I have ever seen, bar none. Then the big guy looks up and looks directly at me, out in front of God and everyone. It was then I realized, okay, I am not looking at any man, but not really animal either, it didn't seem. Now let me attempt to explain what big guy did. Imagine yourself standing looking straight ahead at some target, and right next to you and slightly in front of you to your right is a big tree. Your desire now is to get behind that tree with little movement as possible. What you would most likely do is simply lift your left foot, pivot 90 degrees clockwise on your right foot, and with your head and neck frozen in place to watch your target while moving. That is what he did. Next thought was, do I have any clean underwear back at camp, because I think I need them. Then the flight or fight response kicked in on me, but I forced myself to stop, think, and evaluate. I determined that at 83 yards, didn't know it was exactly 83 yards at that time. I went and marked off the distance later. I was actually guessing at the time 100 yards. There was no way, no matter how fast he was, that he could ever cover that distance before I put at least 3 bullets in him. However, I thought later that may have only pissed him off as big as he was. But anyway, when I assured myself there was no real danger, I calmed down and started thinking clearly again. The big guy was now standing behind that oak tree, peeking out, watching me. Then suddenly he popped behind the tree and I couldn't see him. So at that point, I very slowly got up and moved behind that little tree near me. Then I peeked around that basketball-sized tree. By the time I looked back up, he was once again peeking out from behind the tree. Now this time I thought that poor guy is deformed somehow, because there appeared to be some kind of growth just around and below his throat. I could not make it out, but definitely could see the discoloration and could see that there was something there that didn't belong. I was straining as hard as I could to make out the facial features of this guy, but try as I might, was simply no way I could make out any details of his face. That was my one real regret in this whole experience. Anyway, we just kind of stared at each other for a couple seconds. Then he popped back behind the tree. So I did the same the best I could. After a couple seconds behind the tree, I pop out my head but don't see him, but I stay in that position a couple of more seconds. Then the big guy pops out his head again and looks at me. Now I am really confused, because the growth that seemed to be on his throat is now over the top of where a clavicle would be. I don't know what is going on. It is just too far away from me to make out fine detail. Someone with better vision probably would have been able to make things out better. Now here it becomes surreal, and I don't know if I can put into words the way the situation seemed to instantly change. One moment I am so tense you could not have driven a straight pin up my butt with a 16-pound sledgehammer. The very next second, a calm came over me, and somehow I just had a feeling there was nothing to be concerned about. So while he was looking at me, I purposely leaned my rifle up against the stump I was just sitting at with him watching me. I just got the distinct feeling that he knew that I meant no harm and had no intention of doing anything to him. Maybe not. Maybe I am just reading into that more than I should. For lack of a better word, we basically played peekaboo for another 2 minutes, popping back and forth behind the trees. I just got a feeling he would have liked to have gotten a closer look at me, just like I wanted to with him. Of course, that was never going to happen. I think we may have kept playing peekaboo for a while longer, but something happened that changed the circumstance. After a total of just about 3 minutes, he suddenly snaps around in the other direction. I was thinking, what the heck? Then I heard what he had heard, a very large snap coming from the woods on top of this finger. I peed. Then the big guy turns, and keeping the tree between me and him, he simply walks off. He did not run or even walk particularly fast. He was walking a bit faster leaving than he did walking in, but not in any panic. I figured if it was something that made him want to leave the area, I better figure out quick what made that noise. So I pick up my rifle and immediately start scanning. I want so badly to walk over the tip to see if I can get a glimpse of the big guy, but I don't dare until I resolve this issue. After a couple minutes of searching and listening to the noise, I finally tracked to the source of the noisemaker. A frigging armadillo. Dang, I missed a possible chance to get a better look at the big guy because of an armadillo. As I stated above, after the incident, I walked off the distance and also solved one of the mysteries. The abnormal growth on the big guy was not on the big guy at all. It was on the tree. It was a viral knot about the size of a softball. I am 5'9", standing under the knot. I could barely touch the bottom edge of the knot with my fingers standing on my tiptoes and my arms extended as far as I could. I found no tracks whatsoever, even though I knew the exact location of where he walked up and back from. But the ground was very hard, and even a bulldozer would have been hard-pressed to leave any tracks in that ground. Now I have some more details about the creature for you here with the follow-up investigative report. The submitter has a scientific background and is an extremely articulate and credible witness. He estimates the weight to be between 700 and 800 pounds. Its build was massive and extremely muscular. Its shoulder width was approximately 40 inches wide, with a slight tapering towards the waist, but boxy in appearance. He was not able to distinguish a neck. He described the hair as being so dark brown that it was almost black and uniform in color. The texture was coarse like horsehair. The hair length was 2 inches all over with the exception of the bicep area, where it appeared to be slightly longer. The hair on his head was described as someone having a bad hair day. It was frizzy, matted, and spiked up in places. The skin on the face was dark and covered with short hair. When the creature snapped his head around to find the nose, a prominent brow ridge was noticed. Its hands were huge, and its arm length was long and out of proportion. Its legs were proportional to its body's length, but shorter in length than the arms. The creature had very well developed gluteus maximus muscles, forming what the submitter called a bubble butt. The creature's feet were not in his line of sight. The creature's gait was very methodical when first seen. He walked in a very smooth, slow, effortless glide. When it departed, it sped up slightly, but was unhurried. It took 3 long steps and was out of sight. He believes that this creature was every bit as curious about him as he was about it, and he got the distinct feeling the creature would have stayed longer had they not been interrupted. He did not see any facial expression because of the distance between them, but he did notice a visible physical change in the creature when he leaned his gun up against the tree stump. He reported the tension in the muscles in the arms and chest of the creature relaxed. He did not tell his hunting partner about the event. It took him 6 months to digest what he had seen. He has no question of the intelligence of the creature he was viewing, reporting that what he witnessed was very close in appearance to a human being. The witness holds a position within the Department of Defense that is classified as sensitive critical. He delayed submitting this report for this and other reasons. He had no idea where to file a report in 1986, and the newspaper was not an option given his security clearance.